New in Substance Painter 1.7, we have the ability to set a custom shader on a texture set. This allows us to use multiple shaders within the project. Before we take a look at this feature, I want to give a special thanks to Glauco Longhi for allowing us to use this fantastic orc asset for demos and tutorials. So here in the texture set list, you can see that I have multiple texture sets. Over here on the far right of the column, we have this new button. And in particular, let's take a look at the head and the hair. So for instance, the hair, you can see that it has a skin. So if I click this button here, I have the ability to utilize the main shader, or I can create a new shader instance. So in the case of the head, I wanted to use a subsurface shader. With the head texture set selected, if we look over here in the shader, you can see that the PBR SSS shader is applied, and the instance name has been set to skin. Now this subsurface shader doesn't actually ship with Painter, but you can download this shader for free at Substance Share. Just go to the shaders category and you'll find it there. Likewise, let's take a look at the hair texture set. So here I have this selected. Let's come over here to our viewer settings and take a look at the shader. Here you can see that the PBR Metal Rough with Alpha Blending shader has been applied and the instance name has been given hair. So let's take a look at another texture set, for instance, helmet. So notice that helmet has the instance tag of main shader. So if we take a look, you can see that this is just my default shader and it's using the PBR Metal Rough, instance name here, main shader. So with this new setup, you can see that we can have the base PBR Metal Rough, but in the case of the head, I want to use subsurface, so just this head texture set is using a subsurface. Here for the hair, I'm using an alpha blending for the opacity. So here in the eyebrows, you can see that we have some hair, so I'm using this opacity shader to work with that. So now we're going to take a look at how we can set up these shader instances. So first, let's start with the hair. So if I come over and select my hair texture set, notice again, every texture set that I have is utilizing this main shader. So I don't have any instances yet. What I want to do for this hair is I want to take where some opacity information has been mapped to all these polygon planes here. I want to be able to feed that opacity information to an opacity shader so that we get the appropriate shading here in our viewport. So to do this, I'm going to come over to this main shader button and I'm going to click this here, and I now have the option to create this new shader instance. So I'm going to do that, and you can see here just by default it appends the word copy here. And so with the texture set selected, we'll come over here to our viewer settings and we're going to set a new instance name. Now in my case here, I'm probably just going to give this an instance name of the type of shader that I'm working with. So I'm going to call this opacity. And so here you can see that the name opacity has changed, and I can now come over to the shader slot here and I can choose a different shader to apply to this texture set. So in my case here, I want to use the PBR Metal Rough with Alpha Blending. So we'll enable this, and now you can see that the opacity information that's set on this fill layer here is being fed into the appropriate shader, and this is the result that we get. So at this stage, only the hair texture set is utilizing this opacity shader. If I had another texture set, let's just say for instance the helmet needed to have some transparent areas to it, like where maybe there's some holes cut out or something, I could just come over to the main shader button, click this button, and I could choose the opacity shader from here. So it's very easy to assign these shader instances through this pop-up menu. Again, if I go back to this hair, and let's just say that I want to remove this, if I click this button, I have the option here to remove opacity. So that's just going to remove this shader instance. So now let's do the same thing again, except this time we're going to use a subsurface shader here on our head. So what I need to do is select the head texture set. Again, come over to this button, let's click this, and let's create a new shader instance. So we've done that. Let's go back to our viewer settings. Here for the shader, I'm going to call this, I'm going to change the instance name, and so here we'll just call this SSS. And so here you can see the name has been applied. And now we'll go to the shader and we'll set this. So I'm going to click this button here and I'm going to choose this PBR SSS shader. So I'm going to go ahead and just apply this shader and I'm going to set up the parameters. So I have a transmissive map option here, and in the texture set settings, a thickness map has been baked for this texture set. So we want to utilize that. So I'll just check transmissive. And for the subdermal color here, I'll select this and I'm just going to set a value. And so now within my project, with all these multiple texture set lists, we're actually utilizing 3 different shaders. So our hair, again, texture set is using opacity, our head is using subsurface, and then the other texture sets that we have are just utilizing this main shader, which happens just to be the basic metal rough shader. So these shader instances greatly improve the workflow on projects where you're going to be utilizing multiple texture sets where different shaders are going to need to be applied. In this example, we're going to take a look at the new PBR Car Paint shader. So here I have the Car Paint shader enabled, and I'm going to take a look at this base fill layer I have for the main color. So here I have body paint. The base color is going to be the main or the primary color that's utilized by the Car Paint shader. Here you can see that we also have the ability to change the secondary paint color. So here in the shader parameters, we have our AO intensity as well as the quality. Here we have the ability to add a flakes texture. So by default, we have this flakes texture here as normal, but you can import in a custom flakes texture if you like. Then we also have the ability to change the flakes scale, intensity, and color. So here we can zoom in and you can see that as I start to just kind of rotate around here in the viewport, we start to see the differences between the coloring of the paint as well as the flake intensity and scale. So here I'm going to change the scale. So if I bring this all the way down, you can see here's where the actual flakes are showing up here. And in this case, it's probably just a bit too intense for this. So what I'm going to do is just take this flake scale and just pull this value up fairly high. And so here we have this value. Now, just as I mentioned, we can go in and we can change these different colors here. So here, for instance, we can change our secondary. I can come in and just, adjust this secondary color here. Now, one thing to note about utilizing the Car Paint shader is that on this base layer here, we want to make sure that we have the metallic value set all the way to 1. So what the metallic value is actually going to be driving to the shader is it's going to be a difference between 2 different PBR models. So at metallic of 1, it's going to be using the PBR Car Paint, and as we set this down to a value of 0, it's going to be using just the base PBR model. So this means that when you add things like dirt, you're able to add this on top of the car paint, and then it's not going to also have the flakes effect and things like that within the dirt, because the dirt's going to have a low to 0 metallic value. Here in this example, we're going to take a look at the velvet shader. So for my shader, you can see that I have the PBR velvet shader enabled, and here are the parameters that we have. So one of the most important parameters we have here is this fibers texture. And so if I click this button, you can see that we have this fibers noise map that's been applied. Now, you can also add your own custom fibers texture and apply it here using this pop-up menu. We also have the ability to adjust the fiber scale. Next, we have the sheen control, which is also driven by this sheen variation noise map. Again, we can click this button. Here you can see that a noise texture is applied, but again, you can add your own custom noise. Here we can adjust the edge, as well as fabric tint. So the fabric shader is good to use when you need to create cloth in Substance Painter. There have been some new modes added to the alignment. So here I'm going to come over to my brush, and under alignment you can see that I now have a new option that is enabled by default, and it's tangent wrap. Here if we clicked our drop down, you can see that we also have another option for tangent, which is planar. Let's first take a look at wrap. Now before I actually demo this, I'd also like to point out that backface culling is now enabled by default for both of the tangent modes. So here we're going to take a look at wrap. So I'm going to come over to this model, and you can see that I have this flat face and this 90-degree angle here. So let's take a look at what wrap does. So I'm going to come in and I'm just going to stamp down this image that I have applied to my color channel. And so now I'll just kind of rotate the model, and you can see that the stroke has been completely projected onto the surface, and it wraps around this corner. Since we have back face culling enabled, it's also being limited by this 90-degree setting. So now let's take a look at planar. So I'm just going to switch my alignment to tangent planar, and let's just make sure I have the brush roughly the same size, and we'll just move down and let's just stamp this image down once more. So now you can see that planar is fading the stamp when the angle of the surface becomes too extreme. So here you can see the difference between these two settings. Once again, we have back face culling enabled. So if I just drop this value down quite a bit, and let's just come in and just do the stamp once more, here you can see that I'm able to mask that depending on this angle limit that I have set here for my back face culling. The planar mode also gives me this nice soft edge. There have also been precision improvements to the brush engine. This means better handling of subpixel painting when switching to lower resolutions, and better filtering for stamping, as well as anti-aliasing when painting sharp strokes and patterns. So now we're going to take a look at the new generators. Here on this fill layer, I'm going to start by creating a mask. So we'll right click and we'll add a black mask. With the mask selected, let's come over to our add effect, add generator, and let's choose this 3D distance generator. So what this is going to do is create a spherical mask. And so again, I'll just left click here just to load this generator to drive the mask. And so here at the default settings, this is what we get. So let's first try adjusting the radius. So I'm going to drop the radius down, and you can see that that's just changing the overall size of this spherical 3D mask. So next, I'm going to increase the contrast a bit so we can kind of see this. Let's go back and just increase our radius here. And let's start to mess with our positions. So like I said, this is going to generate a mask in 3D, so we have access to the position X, Y, and Z. So let's start by just adjusting the X. So here I'll just move this over towards 0, and you can see that I'm now pushing the mask over here on the positive X axis. Now let's go to position Y, and we'll start to increase this towards 1, and you can see that I can start to push this mask up towards the top of the head. So now I'll just make another adjustment here to the actual position X, and now I've basically placed this mask here on top. And so with this, I can then go back here to my radius and start to increase my radius. So here is how we're starting to mask this. And so as you can see, we can utilize this spherical mask. We have control over the X, Y, and Z position. We also have a contrast control here that lets me just kind of tighten up this feathering here around the edge. So now let's take a look at the light position generator. I'm going to just come back over here to my generator button, and I'm going to replace it with the MG light. So here's what we have at the default settings. And this generator is going to allow us to mask based on a horizontal and vertical angle. So let's take a look at this. Let's come over to the horizontal angle and let's start to adjust this. So here I'm just going to push this angle back around 71 or so. And so this is the type of effect that I'm getting. And let's take a look at our vertical angle. So we can control the overall size of this effect by just adjusting the highlight glossiness. So as I start to increase this, you can see that it basically gets kind of a tighter effect. Very similar to making a sharp highlight. So let's just kind of drop this value a bit, and you can see that we start to get more of a broad effect here. And we can also increase the overall intensity of this by using the highlight level control. So I'll start to increase this guy, and you can see that we start to just get more of a brighter effect. Let's decrease the glossiness here. So we'll just push this value up a little bit higher. And so we get a bit more of kind of a sharp effect here on the edge. And again, I'll just start to just adjust my angle. So as you can see, this mask is really good for stylized assets. In this case, we're using it to create a rim light here for the head. So now we're going to take a look at a very powerful filter that allows us to bake lighting into our maps. And so in this example, we're going to take a look at a stylized asset. So currently, you can see that I'm just lighting this model here in the PBR viewport using IBL. So here you can see that we're in material mode. And so the idea here is that I want to set up some baked lighting so that I can only export out just my base color, and I'm going to have an effect that looks, something like this, and it's all going to be baked down into that single map that I can then use in my game or project. So what I'm going to do first is come over here to my viewer settings, and for the mode, I'm going to switch this to solo, and we're going to be just looking at our base color. So this is the map that we want to export. So here you can see that we're looking at just the albedo value, and now what we want to do is utilize this new filter to add all of the lighting information back in. So first thing I'm going to do is just come over here to the layer stack, and I'm going to click this plus button, and that's going to create for me a standard layer. So here we'll just name this one, this will be baked light. And so now that I have this, and again, we're only going to be really focusing here on our base color. So I want to come up to the layer, make sure that base color here is active in the channel selector, and I want to change the blending mode here to pass through. So this means that any of the filter or painting or anything that we do, it's going to pass through down through all the other layers. So now with this layer selected, let's add a filter. So we'll click our effects filter button here, and I'm going to come over here to the add filter, and then I'm going to choose the filter. And we're going to be working with this guy here, the baked lighting. So I'm going to just left click to enable this filter. And now already in the viewport, you start to see that we get this effect of having some shading. However, we're only looking at just this base color. So we have several options here in the parameters. For output, if we want, we can output specular only. So if I wanted just to make like a specular map, I could do that. Here's diffuse only, and here we have the option to do or output diffuse and specular. So here we're looking at both the specular and diffuse combined. Now, the first thing we have here is our material. So let's take a look at our material. We have our dielectric reflectance value, and so if I start to increase this, you can see that I'm just introducing some reflectance here. Let's start by just adding some diffuse AO. So I'm going to just increase this guy. Let's also take a look at our diffuse cavity. We'll increase this. Specular AO, and we'll start to increase this guy, and our specular cavity as well. And so what that's doing here, you can see right here in the tire that it's starting to occlude these specular highlights based on the ambient occlusion map that is added here as part of our image input. Now, we also have the ability, if we want to, just kind of blur this cavity smoothness here. So if we're, again, just kind of going for more of the stylized look, I'm just going to blur this. And we also have a setting here for edge intensity. So let's start to increase the edge intensity. Here you can see that all the edges are just becoming more bright. You can really see it here on the box. So I'm going to increase my edge intensity, and then I'm also just going to increase my edge smoothness. So I'm just kind of blurring this. So here's the effect that I'm getting thus far. And that kind of sets up our basic material that we're going to be working with. So now let's take a look at our sun sky. So here we have options for adjusting our sun as well as our sky intensity. So this is kind of like global illumination. If we take this sun intensity and drop this guy all the way down to 0, here under sky intensity, you can see that we're just getting kind of this ambient light. So if I drop this all the way down, no lighting is in the scene basically, and this is all black. So here we can adjust our sky intensity, so we get something like this. And if I want to, I can actually adjust the color here. So we can darken the sky, whatever kind of color you want basically your environment to be. We can also adjust things like the horizon color as well as the ground color. So here it's set to a dark value for the ground. So let's give it some bounce light, or the effect of having some bounce light. So I'm going to introduce just a little bit of color. Let's maybe make it something a little bit more kind of yellowish brown, so something like this maybe. And here you can see that it kind of gives that effect that, we've got some bounce light coming up around the bottom here based on this ground color. And here I'll just kind of maybe decrease that sky intensity a little bit. So in this case, or just to demonstrate it, let's go ahead and go back and adjust our sun intensity. So here we have our sun. We also have the ability to adjust the sun color. So let's just make it kind of real yellow, yellowish like this, real warm value, just so we can kind of demonstrate the effect. And here we have horizontal and vertical controls for the position of the sun. So if I start to just adjust the sun horizontal value here, it just gives me the effect of just moving the position of the sunlight. So here we've got like this low value here. We can drive this guy up to a higher value. Again, we're just kind of just adjusting the overall position of the sun. In this particular case, I'm actually going to take my sun intensity and drop this guy all the way down because I don't want to work with the sun. What I am going to do is introduce some lights that I have here. So here is a light 1 option. By default, the intensity of these guys is all the way down to 0, which means they basically have no effect. So for intensity here, I'm just going to start to increase this guy. And let's just adjust the horizontal angle here for our light. So I might push this guy over here more towards the front. And again, I can adjust the vertical angle. So here we've got like this low angle. And then here we have kind of this higher angle, as you see here. And we can adjust the overall color of this. So here, I'll try something more like just a little bit of a warmer light, something like this here. Next, I'm going to come over to light 2 and let's enable this guy. So here we'll just pull this guy in and maybe let's just make this guy here just a little bit, just change the value, maybe a little bit bluer value like this. And again, I can just start to adjust my values here for my horizontal and vertical angle. Let's go back to that light 1 and let's just change the colors here. Here, let's do something more like this. And I'm going to increase the intensity. Maybe play just a little bit here with that horizontal angle. Let's do something like this. So just by using this baked lighting filter, I was able to add in some shading qualities just to this base color. So now when I go to export, if I wanted, I could set up a configuration export and just export this base color map. And so now I have this stylized look of some lighting and some shading all baked down into this single base color image. We now have the ability to work with templates here in Substance Painter. Let's take a look at how this works. So I'm going to create a new project from a template. So here I'll go to File, New, and in the New Project dialog, you can see at the top we have the option to choose a template. So there are several that ship with Substance Painter, and we're going to take a look at the new Dota 2 template. So here I'm going to select this template, and I'm going to select a mesh. And now I'll click OK to create the project. So a template is a collection of all your project settings. For example, if we come over here to our texture set settings, you can see that the channel list includes all of the channels that you need to create assets for Dota 2. Also, here in the viewer settings, if we take a look at the shader, you'll notice that the Dota 2 shader is applied automatically. This shader mimics the Dota 2 shader, and it's based on the amazing Dota shader from Ace Angel. Here's an example Dota 2 asset that was created here in Painter using the Dota 2 shader. There's also a Dota 2 export preset which automatically packs all of the masks that you've painted into the 2 mask maps that are expected by Dota 2. So now let's run through the process of creating our own templates. So we're going to start by using a default. So let's go to File, New. So we're creating a new project. And here for the template, I just have one of the default PBR Metal Rough templates selected. Now I need to add a mesh since we're just creating a new project to start. So I'll just use this vehicle low. Now for this template, I'm going to be creating assets for UE4. So I'm going to make sure that I have my compute tangent space per fragment enabled. And the document resolution, I'm just going to set this to 2K as my base. So now that I have this set, I'm going to go ahead and just create the project. So now that I have the project, I can start to run through some settings here that I want to store within this template. So for instance, let's come over to our texture set settings and let's add some additional channels. So I'm going to click this plus button here and I'm going to add an emissive channel. And next, I'm going to come over here to my viewer settings and I'm going to change my environment map. So I'm going to use this one here, this Corsica Beach. And I might adjust something like the environment blur, so just drop this here a bit. I'm going to enable shadows by default, and for the lightweight computation, I'm going to set this to average. And I'm also going to change my shader. So I'm going to click my shader button here, and I'm going to utilize this here, my PBR coded. And so now that I have this set up, I'm going to save these project settings as a template. So let's go to File, and now I have the option to Save as Template. So we'll choose this here, and I'm just going to overwrite one that I created before. So I call this PBR_MR hard surface. And you can see that these templates, they have this .spt extension, and they're saved within the your PC Documents Substance Painter shelf templates. So now that I have this set, we'll just click Save and overwrite this guy. And now I have the ability to, when I start a project, I can use this new hard surface template. So let's just do it. Let's go to File, New, and we'll just discard these changes here. And for the template option, I'm going to just choose my PBR hard surface. Now you can see that my compute tangent is enabled. My document resolution is already set. Again, I've just got to find the mesh that I want to work with. Here, we'll just use that vehicle low. And so we'll open this guy and we'll click OK. We create our project. Notice here my environment map is already set to Corsica Beach. My blur setting is just the way I like it. Shadows enabled, average computation. If we come over here to our, again, our viewer settings, let's take a look at our shader. Notice here the PBR coded is enabled for us. So as you can see, you can utilize templates to basically store a collection of project settings. And now when you create a new project, you can just choose that template and it's going to open the project with your desired settings. So last but not least, I just want to quickly run through some changes to the blending modes and filtering. So we've added two new blending modes. If we just come over here to a layer, let's check this out. We'll click this button here to access our blending modes, and we now have the Add Sub blending mode as well as Subtract. Also, on fill layers, you can see that we have our filtering option. We now have a new option, which is bilinear high quality. So as I mentioned earlier in the brush section of the video, improvements have been made to the filtering. And again, you can access this new filtering method here through bilinear high quality.